Here on The Startup Life, we inspire entrepreneurs every day to maximize themselves and their business. We do this with words of encouragement and actionable ideas to take their business and themselves to the next level. However, there are some of you out there that may have made a mistake in the past, and trust me, I'm not here to judge. You found yourself in a situation and you had to pay the price with your time. You went in, did your bid, and now you're out. But now you find yourself paying a second price, one that you probably didn't anticipate, and quite frankly, I don't think it's one you deserve. You want to make a decent living, but your past keeps haunting you in this regard. So you get frustrated. And some of you may even start thinking about making another mistake. If there is anyone out there that this applies to out in Startup Nation, no worries. You are in my tribe. I got you, fam. Because when you have the entrepreneurial mindset, just know there is always another way. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life. Let's begin.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hey Startup Nation, do you enjoy the startup life? Now you can let the world know with gear from the show. Choose from the Label Yourself, Make Your Own Luck, and Making Money t-shirts to tell your story of your path of entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to purchase. All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. You are listening to The Startup Life with Dominic Lawson, powered by the Binge Podcast Network. So on today's show, we're going to talk about some of those about you in Startup Nation that, you made, like I said, we made a mistake in the past. And so we're trying to find a way to reinvent ourselves, reinvent our lives, and really go on to be productive citizens in the world. So in the first segment, we're going to talk about, once you get out of jail, some ways to start to reestablish your credit. When we're talking about starting a business or whatever, that's one of the first things we may want to do, and it's really important when we start about not just starting up, but scaling as well. Next, we'll talk about, for some of those who don't necessarily want to start a business, but maybe you want to go back in the workplace. That's fine. We support that here on The Startup Life. And so we're going to talk about some companies out there that are willing to hire people who have served time. And then we'll go to break. And then when we come back, many of you who have served time may think that there's limited resources out there for you to kind of start your company. That is not true. We're going to dispel that, and we're going to give you some of those resources here on the show. And lastly, Startup Nation, when I do shows like these, I like to give you proof of concept that what you want to do can work with your entrepreneurial idea and your business dreams. So we're going to share some of those success stories, proof of concept of people who have served time and got out and made successful businesses. So Startup Nation, I hope you're ready to receive great value today, and let's take flight. Startup Nation, I think one of the craziest things out there is that when you are incarcerated, right, and you have like these debts or like student loans or whatever kind of debts you have, it's like those things don't go away. Now, I'm not saying they should just go away completely, like paid in full or whatever the case may be, but I think there should be some type of forbearance apparatus in place for people who are incarcerated. Like, it's something we do for the military and this, that, and the other. And I get it, right? That's something honorable. We want to honor our veterans in that regard. Happy Veterans Day to all my veterans out there. But at the same time, I think there needs to be something similar. Maybe not as good as we do for veterans, but something similar that we do for people who are incarcerated. Like, how in the world can you pay back a debt and you're in jail, right? It's like, I feel like that's not fair. But, once again, like I said, it's like you're paying a second price, and it's one I don't think you necessarily deserve. But here on The Startup Life, we only focus on what we can control. And so what we can control is that once we get out, we can do something about it. And one of the things we can do is start the path to reestablish our credit. The first thing that we can do, Startup Nation, is make a budget. Make a budget, understand expenses and, income or whatever the case may be, and really do that balance scale with it to understand, where your money's coming from, where you're going to. So that way, when we have that in place, then we'll know if we have a little extra to kind of pay down some of our debt, or we have a little bit less to where we can't pay a little bit that month, or we can't pay anything that month, and that's okay. And believe it or not, Startup Nation, there are organizations out there that can help you with this. For example, there's the Consumer Education and Training Services, or CENTS, out of Seattle, Washington, where it helps you, organize your budget, and helps with like money management, and is specifically geared for people who are re-entering society, right? And so that can be a great resource for you, Startup Nation, as you try to rebuild your life, because I know it's been difficult and I know it's been frustrating, but there's a way. There's definitely a way. And then another thing you want to do once you get out is to assess your debt. Like, who do you owe? Get a credit report, annualcreditreport.com. See who your debtors are, right? And then give them a call. The thing is that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, if you tell them your story and you tell them what was going on, they can empathize with you, right? Even sympathize with as well. And so give them a call, see what you can do, see what you can work out. See if you can get like that type of forbearance, not necessarily through, a law like I was talking about earlier, but maybe through that company, maybe allow for some type of forbearance with you and work with you in that regard. Maybe they'll say, hey, we can't offer you a forbearance, but what we can do is offer you some type of really low monthly payment. And that's fine. That's a win, Startup Nation. We'll take that, right? Because the thing is, like, most people understand that, like, once you come out from doing time, you're trying to reestablish stuff. You're trying to reestablish, your standing in society. You're trying to reestablish, reconnections with your family. And that's a lot to go through in itself. And so to have this financial piece that you have to reestablish as well is quite a daunting task. And so, like I said, most people can understand that, not all, because some people, let's just be honest, some people are just jerks. They just are. But, if you assess your debt, you know what you're tackling. And it's not just this boogie monster, or whatever the case may be, that's just out, in the stratosphere to where you're just aimlessly trying to attack. And so, honestly, Startup Nation, like, some of those debtors that you may owe while you are doing time, they may have become what they call stale debt. Now, what this is that, like, basically, I think it's like 7 years or something like that. If you haven't paid something in 7 years, then it becomes something to where legally you don't necessarily have to pay it back, but you do owe that money, right? And the thing comes off your credit report, wherever the case may be. So, make sure you do your due diligence with that. And in some cases, some extreme cases, you may, bankruptcy may be an option. This is one of those things where you probably need to go and get some legal help with that regard. And believe it or not, there are resources out there. I was not able to find any just now, and I do apologize about that. There may be some resources out there free just for incarcerated personnel in order to get free legal advice and see if that's an option for you. Because honestly, that's another thing that piles up: legal fees. When people, collect the debt company or whatever the case may be, they use legal action in order to collect that debt, and they pass that on to you. And so you may be able to get some of those waived if you explain you was incarcerated, trying to get your life back together. Because, man, it's like I said, you're paying this second price, and it's strange. It's hard enough trying to find somewhere to stay and have money for food or wherever the case may be. And so now you find yourself with all this debt. And so just don't despair. There are ways to get around that. And then also, this is where after this point, this is where you start to rebuild your credit. One of the easiest things you can do is, like, you have a spouse or a parent, or maybe even, a grown-up adult that you trust or whatever the case may be, you can become an authorized user on one of their credit cards or whatever the case may be, right? And so what happens is they add you as an authorized user or authorized signer on their credit card. And so when they make payments, your credit score incrementally goes up. Now, there is a flip side. If they don't make payments, then you will get affected by that as well. So there is a little bit of risk in that case involved, but it really is a very unique tool and a very good tool to help start reestablishing our credit, reestablishing, our ways to use credit in our benefit for sure. Also, Startup Nation, you may be able to get a secured credit card. Now, what this is that basically is like you use kind of like collateral, if you will. for a credit card. So basically, let's say you want a credit card and you want a $300 limit. Basically, you would give the bank $300 up front, and they will issue a credit card with that credit line. And so, and depending on the bank, sometimes if you do well with that, they'll increase the credit limit, even though it's still only secured by the $300, or they'll give you your $300 back and increase the credit limit. So it just depends on how well you do with the credit card and also the particular bank, because not all banks have that particular program. But the good ones do, though. The good ones do. And so I know when I used to work at Wells Fargo, we had a program like that. Also, like Bank of America and your U.S. bank, your big banks, your big national banks usually have programs like these. A lot of times your credit unions and your smaller regional banks may not necessarily have them, but I would ask you that you do your due diligence and make sure you shop around with different banks, with credit cards, secure credit cards, when you're trying to reestablish your credit. Look, you're going to face many challenges as you get out, and if you already just if you just gotten out, or whatever the case may be, you're going to face many challenges. But just understand that it's not impossible. Okay. Also, if you find yourself trying to get a bank account, Startup Nation, and you're having an issue with that, you can get prepaid debit card. Okay. Now, granted, when you have a prepaid debit card, it doesn't report to a credit agency and it's not building your credit, but it is helping with that establishing the budget piece. You have a place to, when you start working or have your company or whatever the case may be, there's a place for you to have money to go to in a store and to, maybe earn interest in some regard, even though interest rates are extremely low when it comes to this checking and savings account. But that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother podcast, Startup Nation. But at the very least, with a prepaid debit card, you have a place, you have a bank account, if you have access to funds in order to do what you need to do. And the thing is, prepaid debit cards have become extremely popular for what we like to call the underbanked, the people who can't get traditional bank accounts. And they have become extremely sophisticated. As a matter of fact, if you're familiar with the company Netspend, NETSPEND.com, and probably there in the show notes for you, Startup Nation, they have prepaid accounts set up not only for personal accounts but also business prepaid accounts as well. And they are, I think, like $4.95 to set up or something like that. But after that, it's like there's no monthly fee or something like that. And so that could be a great way for not only your personal finances, but for your business finances as well. The Startup Nation, like I said, entrepreneurship may not be for you, and that's okay. And so what we want to talk about now is some, places that are very friendly to people who have served time and are looking to kind of like reestablish their role in society and make a decent living for themselves. Now, this first option is probably, I think, in my opinion, probably the best option. Maybe because I'm prior military or whatever the case may be, or maybe I'm bringing it up because it's Veterans Day, but that's neither here nor there, Startup Nation. But the first one I want to talk about is the military. And the reason I think this is the best option for people who have served time is because a lot of times people who have gone in and served time in prison or wherever the case may be, and they get out, they get used to this sense of structure. They get used to this sense of like having a schedule, predetermined for them, and they know what to do, when to do it, or whatever the case may be. And so a lot of times when you don't have that structure, that's when, unfortunately, a lot of times, we have repeat offenders or whatever the case may be. But the military is not necessarily like prison, but in the regard of that structure, it is very similar. And so a lot of times the military, especially when recruitment is low, is always looking to have an avenue for people who have served time to come and serve in the military. This happens not here only in the U.S., but also in the U.K. as well. When recruitment is low, they are very friendly to people who have served time. And the beauty of being in the military is, and when we talk about that structure piece, is that it can be a nice transition from going from superstructure to no structure at all. And so the military has that structure in place, but also has a piece in there to where you can have a little bit of freedom, a little bit of, determining what your schedule is going to be or whatever the case may be. And so I think the military is an amazing option for people who have served time for that very reason. They do background checks and things of that nature, and depending on what you serve time for, you could be disqualified from the military, or it could be a situation where you just need a waiver, or whatever the case may be. And as I continue on this segment of the show, Startup Nation, let me be clear about something. For those of you who have served time, be honest. Don't lie. Because that's a lot of times when you don't get hired for some of these jobs, that's usually the reason why. Now, granted, there are some who discriminate, just because you are a felon, like I don't want him near my business or my company or whatever the case may be. And that's fine. That says more about them than it does about you. But what I am saying is that be honest, be upfront, let people know, like, look, I've served some time, I'm trying to reestablish my life, whatever the case may be. The thing is, Startup Nation, people, for the most part, love redemption stories. They love comeback stories. They love second chance stories. And so a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times when people have the opportunity to grant that to them, to a person, that's huge. And they take advantage of that. And so as we go through this list, just because you serve time doesn't necessarily mean it's a guarantee that you'll get hired. But what I will say is that if you're upfront and you're open and honest, then there is still a pathway for you to get hired in that regard. Another one, Startup Nation, the trusty golden arches, McDonald's. McDonald's is always one that has been friendly for people who have served time. And there's been many success stories from people who have not only got jobs at McDonald's, but have gone on to be managers and district managers and regional managers, but also have gone on to acquire franchises and become franchisees of McDonald's, right? Talk about a success story, right? You started off not thinking you wanted to be an entrepreneur, and you saw the pathway because you got McDonald's process down to a T. He's like, you know what? I want to run a couple of these. And many people who have served time have gone on to do that. And so that's just a classic example of, you said, look, entrepreneurship ain't for me, and voila, here you are. And so McDonald's is an excellent place to consider when you're re-entering society to try to find a job at. Hilton Hotels as well. And they have and Hilton is massive. And so when you think about the Hilton, it's not, the Hilton Hotel Company, it's not just the Hilton Hotel itself. They have many hotels under that umbrella. They have the Hampton Inns. They have Hilton, obviously, Embassy Suites, Homewood Suites, right? Hilton Grand Vacations, Conrad, Waldorf Astoria, I believe up in New York or wherever the case may be. And so when we think about the Hilton, it's not just the Hilton Hotel. So if you see Hilton, like I can only apply Hilton. No, they have a whole bunch of hotels underneath that umbrella. So it means there's more opportunity for you, Startup Nation, if you're trying to get a job with them. And the thing is that just like fast food, when we talk about McDonald's, tourism is also another industry that is very friendly to people who have served time. So even if it's just not Hilton Hotels, think about Holiday Inn, think about the Radisson, think about Crowne Plaza. And going to the flip side, going back rather, when you think about fast food is very friendly. So it may be not McDonald's, but think about KFC, think about Domino's, think about Subway, think about Five Guys or fast food places. The thing is, Startup Nation, and let me just say this, just because you start off in fries, don't mean you have to end up there. Just because you serve time doesn't mean you can't get this job. So you can start off in fries, and maybe you get to the cashier, and then you get to assistant manager, then manager or shift leader, or wherever the case may be. And you can keep scaling the corporate ladder because, like I said, people love second chance stories. People love redemption stories. So if you're willing to put in the work, they're willing to, put in, and invest in you. Like I said, you can't account for them jerks. Those jerks are going to be jerks. It says more about them than it says about you. Okay. Look, you served your time. They shouldn't discriminate against you for that. So we ain't gonna worry about the jerks. We're going to focus on us, and we're going to keep moving forward, Startup Nation. And just remember that. Starbucks as well. Starbucks is one of those very liberal companies, right? Howard Schultz, the guy who started it, whatever the case may be, he's always talking about people from the other side of the tracks because he says himself he grew up on the other side of the tracks. So when you talk about redemption stories and helping people get back on their feet, Starbucks is a great place to consider if you've thought about, going back into the workforce, or is a great place to consider when going back to the workforce after you've served time. Starbucks is a great employer, has 250,000 people employed worldwide. I mean, hell, there's literally a Starbucks on almost every corner in this country. And so there's plenty of opportunity for you, and they're probably constantly building more. So there's a lot of opportunity for you, Startup Nation, if you serve time to get into a Starbucks, get into a place like that. It could be a great career move. And once again, I'm going to reiterate this because I wanted it to stick in your head. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I don't care. I wanted to stick in your head, Startup Nation, that just because you start off in one of the low-level, entry-level positions, that does not mean you can't scale your career. Does not mean you cannot scale the corporate ladder. Does not mean you cannot not only scale the corporate ladder, but also become a franchisee in that organization that you started off with at that entry-level position. I want you to get that in your head. I want you to understand that. I want you to understand that you fucking deserve a second chance. Don't let anybody tell you that you do not deserve a second chance. You have done your time, you understand the mistake you've made, and you get a fucking second chance. General Electric is one of those companies that's been around for since seems like forever, right? But, and this is one of those jobs where, look, we may have to go to school a little bit before we can jump into General Electric. But the great thing about General Electric is that, is that they do have apprenticeships and internships if you're in many fields, from like engineering, IT, administration, right? And so maybe, we don't necessarily have to go back to school. It'd probably be a good idea, but there are ways to kind of get in the door in a place like General Electric. And hell, look, if you go back to school and then you go into a workplace or wherever the case may be, and you're looking for a job, I would go on a limb and say that, that probably speaks volumes to you, because like that shows investment in yourself, that you really are trying to turn things around. Look, we've all made mistakes. Some of us just didn't get caught for our mistakes. Let's just be honest about that. Like, let's be real here. Some of us just didn't get caught for the mistakes that we made. But for some of you that did, and you had to serve time, you're trying to reinvent yourself. And so if you were to go back to school first and then look for a job, that's probably a great avenue for you to show that employer, like, look, man, I'm out here. I'm trying to get it. Okay? I made a mistake. Yes, I did. And you remember, Startup Nation, be honest on that job application. Don't lie about it. But you like, look, man, I'm out here. I'm out here trying to get it. I'm trying to make a second chance for myself, trying to make a second chance for my family. I got all this stuff going on. I went back to school. I got me a certification, and whatever the case may be, right? You go to that with an employer on that job interview, they're going to give you a second look, for the most part, because like I said, we got jerks out there, but they're going to give you a second look for the most part, right? And and a lot of times they're going to give you a second chance. People love redemption stories. People love comeback stories. IKEA, the Swedish furniture maker, like, look, I think IKEA is a wonderful place. I'm not really a fan of their furniture, but what I will say is they have a great company culture. They have, they have great incentives for people who work there. They're all over the place. I think they employ about 160,000 people all around the world in 27 different countries. So let's say you find yourself and you're in New York. IKEA. I don't know if IKEA is in New York, but let's just say it is for the sake of this example. And let's say you find yourself working, you get out of jail, go to IKEA up in New York, and you find yourself like, look, I want to move to Arizona. Maybe you can transfer that job there. So it's like, once again, there's a path and a way for you to reinvent yourself, right? Because maybe everybody in New York sees you as this one thing. You go to Arizona, now you got a whole new job. You got a new perspective in life. You out there in the sunshine, probably in Arizona, probably a little bit too much sunshine from time to time because it gets pretty hot in Arizona. But you get my point. My point is you get to reinvent yourself, and a job can do that. A job like IKEA can do that. It can send you somewhere else. You get a whole new perspective on life. It's like when coaches or players play for a team or whatever, right? And they're not doing so well, and they go to a whole nother team. The game of basketball, game of football hasn't changed, but they start to perform better. That's because they just needed a fresh air. They needed a fresh perspective. They needed somewhere to reinvent themselves. And you can do that too. You can do that too, Startup Nation. Believe me. For my people out, across the pond in the UK, British Airways. British Airways is a great example of people who are looking to hire people who have made a mistake in the past. It's one of the largest airlines on the planet. British Airways, they have entry-level positions for like cabin crew, aerospace and aviation engineering. Once again, I would check to see if you need to have some type of degree or certification to engage in that type of work. If not, maybe there's an internship and apprenticeship, but just at the very least, shoot your shot. Don't just see that like, oh, they need an engineer, I'm just gonna not apply. Make them say no. Don't you say no for yourself. Force the people, to say no. Okay? Believe it or not, Apple, once again, a lot like Starbucks, is one of those very liberal places when it comes to second chances and things of that nature. Tech people usually are pretty liberal, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Like, there are some people, once again, there are jerks. But tech people usually are pretty liberal. If you want to learn how to code to make apps or whatever the case may be, there's internships specific to Apple as well. Apple wasn't always, once again, like I said, Apple wasn't always engaged in this type of hiring practice, but they sign up for the Fair Chance Business Pledge to have a covenant to make incentives for companies for people who hire felons. And Google and Facebook are also people who are looking to give that second chance to people who have made a mistake in their past. ExxonMobil, if you want to be an oil person, you want to be an oil man or whatever the case may be. I'm sorry, I guess I've watched There Will Be Blood or wherever that movie is with the oil guy once too many times. But anyway, ExxonMobil is another one that also hires people who have served time. Texas Oil giant Shell has also does this as well. ExxonMobil is massive. It's huge. It's like when we have those Fortune 500 companies, that list that comes out each year, ExxonMobil is usually one or two. So talk about job security, right? Or depending on how you look on fossil fuels, but that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother podcast, Startup Nation. But ExxonMobil is a great resource for you as well. Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Enterprise has 7,200 locations in 30 countries, right? As long as you got customer service skills or great, interpersonal skills, like, they are looking for people who have that great customer service skill. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's a service industry, and they're looking for people who can communicate with people, right? And I get it. You may be a little bit shy about that, coming out of, jail or wherever the case may be. But if you're comfortable with yourself, then Enterprise could be a great place for you to try to get a job. Now, I will say with Enterprise, there are certain jobs with Enterprise, because it is a car rental company, certain jobs that talk about, that are related to driving, and you had a felony that's driver related, that actually may disqualify from that job for obvious reasons. But that doesn't mean that there may be other jobs at Enterprise that you can't apply for. So just keep in mind that, look, make them say no. Don't you say no for yourself. And also in that regard, Avis, Budget Rental Car are also friendly to people who have served time as well. IBM, once again, some of these jobs may require for you to go to school to get some type of certification or whatever the case may be, or at the very least, they may have internships or apprenticeships for you to kind of learn on the job as well. But if you like problem solving and hardware engineering or whatever the case may be, or you feel like you want to take a crack at coding or whatever the case may be, think about that. Honestly, what I will say, Startup Nation, that is, like, if you like cyber crimes or stuff like that, hacking or whatever the case may be, you may be disqualified for that job. But there may be an opportunity for you. Hear me out. If you were engaged in cyber crimes or hacking or whatever the case may be, you can actually maybe come in as a consultant. Because the thing is, cyber and tech companies are always looking for security. Security is the big thing when it comes to computers and stuff like that. And so if you're able to consult on, let me break it down a little bit. Long story short, let's say IBM comes out with new cybersecurity software, and they give it to you like, hack this. And so what you do you try to hack it. So if you can find the holes, like here, you need to patch this up here, patch this up here. For all my IT people and cyber and tech people who know about coding and cybersecurity, if I'm saying anything wrong, forgive me. It's my ignorance. But you get what I'm saying, right? Corporations like IBM hire people who are good at hacking and cybercrimes, whatever the case may be, to see where the holes is in their software. And so that way they can patch that up. So just because, you went to jail for like hacking or embezzlement through computer systems or whatever the case may be, there actually may be an opportunity for you to kind of help in that regard. So now you're on the opposite end trying to, stop other people in the future from doing what you may have gone to jail for. And so there actually may be an opportunity in that regard. And then last but not least, Sony. Real quick, Dell, in addition to IBM, is also willing to hire people who have served time. Sony, the computer electronics conglomerate, if you will. I love Sony. I'm a PlayStation guy. And so, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, but if you are in the game design or something like that, that may be something good for you. Music production or film production or whatever the case may be. Sony is always looking for stuff like that because there's many different avenues that Sony goes into. Not just Sony PlayStation, but have like Sony Pictures or whatever the case may be. And like the music company or wherever the case may be. So there's different avenues for you to get into when it comes to Sony and electronics conglomerate. Also, Motorola and LG also fit that regard. Just remember, it may require you to get some type of certification or to go back to school in order to kind of apply for those jobs. But also, once again, make them say no. Don't you say no yourself. Ask to see if they have some type of internship or apprenticeship that can benefit you as well. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. I hope you're getting great value from today's episode of Startup Nation. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you listen to The Startup Life, powered by the Binge Podcast Network. Hey business owner, the Startup Life reach is growing. Wouldn't you like your business to grow with it? Reach out to us to advertise on the Startup Life. You can reach us at 901-857-4818, or you can email me at dominic@askalsolutions.com. I mean, don't get me wrong, like this is a great music to have break on, but wouldn't this break sound a lot better with the same music but your business being advertised on it? If you are a teacher looking for great resources, look no further than our Teaching with Al section of our website. Enjoy great lessons such as our mini lesson for the story of an hour, or dive into the Nixon presidency as part of our legacy series. Enjoy great peace of mind from our units as they are Common Core aligned. Click the link in the show notes to purchase. All right, Startup Nation, so let's continue. So for those of you who want to engage in the life of entrepreneurship and start a company, and, like I said, maybe you're currently in prison. I'm not sure if you're able to listen to podcasts in prison. I know they have internet access and stuff like that. If you're currently in prison or you just got out, you may think that there are limited resources for you to engage in a life of entrepreneurship and starting your company or whatever the case may be. And that's just simply not true. So I want to talk about now about like grants and ways to access capital and programs that can help facilitate that path to entrepreneurship. The first thing you can think of is the correctional facility. Once again, if you are currently incarcerated, there may be ways for you to kind of start that path right there while you're incarcerated. How is that possible? Well, many correctional facilities have programs that allow you to gain like skills or whatever while you're there. For example, if you're working in the kitchen, you're learning a culinary art, that can be, useful to like starting a restaurant once you get outside or once you get out or whatever. Or you can take Microsoft Office or whatever, or maybe some type of coding class if you have access to the internet while you're there. The thing is that like many correctional facilities do have these programs. I'm not going to sit up here and be naive and say they all do, but I do believe a lot of them do have these facilities. And so if you're at a facility where you have these programs in place, take advantage of them. Please do. And if not, when you get on the outside, I want to talk about that next. There are ways to access different avenues as well. The community. Your community has many state and local offices that can help reacclimate you into not just society, but into a way to make yourself a self-employed business owner or entrepreneur, as you like to say. There's state government offices, county government offices, city government offices. Sometimes local churches or places of worship will have things specifically for people who have served time or whatever the case may be. The thing is, this is where you have to kind of do a little bit of leg work. You have to do a little bit of walking around. They're trying to see who has things specifically for people who have been incarcerated to start a company. And there may be some resource. There may be some type of networking event. There may be some type of convention. There may be some type of meeting to where you can get into to learn what's available to you or specifically to what you're trying to do. If it's something specifically for the culinary arts, if it's something specifically for coding, if it's something specifically for being a mechanic, if it's something specifically for learning how to code. So there's just a myriad of things in your community that you can have access to. I don't know if they do and if they have this when you get out, but what they should have is some type of portfolio of access to things in your community once you get out, not just send you with the things you went in with or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. That's just me. Also, there's a website, helpforfelons.org. It's a website that focuses on general reentry into society, not just on starting a business, but just reentry society as well. You're gonna go through a lot of obstacles when you get back out there on your own or whatever the case may be. And so, Help for Felons is a great resource for you to utilize in that regard. Now, for my ones that want to be entrepreneurs, there is a nonprofit community support outreach called Inmates to Entrepreneurs. And if you see, there's a link in the show notes for you to access that thing. So basically what it is there's I think it's like a monthly meeting that you meet with a local business owner. And sometimes they bring in guests to speak or whatever the case may be. But anyway, it's a monthly meeting that you attend to help you start your company. You learn different things like marketing. You learn different things like, how to scale. And so it really is just up to that entrepreneur on what they kind of want to show you. There's many chapters all over the country. And Startup Nation, if you are somebody who has either been previously incarcerated or has never been incarcerated, you can start your own chapter where you are now. If that's something that you want to do and you want to give back to the community, that's something that is very much needed. The ability to empower people who have been away and serving time. And so that's a way for you to give back to your community, Startup Nation. Go to the website, Inmates for Entrepreneurs. Is there in the show notes for easy access to find out how you can be a chapter leader and run your own monthly meetings to help a person who's trying to get back on their feet through the path of entrepreneurship. Also, there's federal education loans and business grants loans. Like, look, if you're trying to learn, if you just got out and you're trying to learn, maybe you want to be an accountant. Maybe you have a thing for graphic design. Maybe you have a thing for HVAC or whatever the case may be, or whatever it is you want to do. There are business grants and federal education loans specifically for people who have had to serve time in the past. And I get it, right? Like you get in this rut and you get, you hear these stigmas of society about people who are felons, but there are resources out there for you. There are people who want to help you, right? And it kind of sucks that you have to find each other, but that's just where we are. You would think, some of the correctional facilities will help you in the rehabilitation process even after the fact. But let's just keep it real for a second. A lot of times those prisons are private facilities and they make money on making sure that you come back. but fuck them. We don't want you to come back. We don't want you to go back there. We want you to be able to empower yourself through entrepreneurship, or in the previous segment, to get a job. So that way you can leave them long gone and you can support yourself, you can support your family, and you can ultimately support your dreams and whatever it is that you want to do, because you have the ability to do that, but you also have the right to search that out. Grants.gov is an excellent place for not just grants, but also is also a great place for you to like look for like government contracts, if you will. There's government contracts all over the place, right? And so if you've started a company or whatever, and you've gotten some of that that business grant money or business loan money or wherever the case may be, then you may have scaled to the point where you can service one of those government contracts or wherever the case may be. Now, some government contracts may require you to disclose certain information about like your criminal background or whatever the case may be. Just like I said about, applying for a job, be honest. Do not hide anything. Be as transparent as possible, because it's usually when you're not being honest and you're not being transparent is what gets people in trouble. But also keep in mind that unfortunately, some grants or whatever the case may be, some, not necessarily grants, some government contracts in grants.gov may disqualify you based on what you did to have to go into prison, but that's okay. There's other, RFPs or government contracts that you can go after. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Let's not worry about that part. Let's focus on what we can control. Don't focus on what we cannot control. That's an important piece when you're trying to re-enter society. Okay? Look, I get it. Like I said, like it's stacked against you. There's people out here trying to not only not set you up for success, there's people out here, probably trying to get you back into jail. Don't give in to the hype. Believe in yourself, empower yourself, I think things will work out for you. Small business administration microloans. Look, sometimes when you start a company, if you're savvy enough, you don't need a $50,000 loan. You don't need a $30 million loan. Maybe just you need a $5,000 loan or a $8,000 loan just to kind of get you started, right? And so SBA microloans are a great way to kind of help get you started in that regard. The average loan from the SBA for those microloans is like $13,000. And so, seek that out. Also, there's also a growing need for the freelance space, right? So if you're a person who already is great at graphic design, if you're a person who has a great radio voice, right? So places like Upwork and Guru, or even Tackle, if you will, are great sources of doing some freelance work. For instance, like if you want to go with Upwork or Freelancer, if you will, and all of this is here in the show notes, Startup Nation, for you to have easy access, so that way you can seek those out. But for instance, let's say you're great at graphic design and somebody's looking for, like myself, who now is part owner of a podcast network. I'm going to need podcast cover art, but I'm not a graphic designer. I may need somebody for that, or I may need somebody to do some voiceover work, right? That's also something that you can probably do as well. And if you're already great at building websites, if you're great at podcast editing, if you're great at just a myriad of things, a lot of things that, for Upwork is like usually digital that you can transport over files, wherever the case may be, or maybe you know how to write essays. And so these are great things that you can do under Upwork. Now, when we talk about Tackle, and that's TAKL, Tackle. Now, if you're great at like landscaping or doing house chores or wherever the case may be, Tackle is a great way to kind of jumpstart that entrepreneurial spirit. There's been plenty of people who engage Tackle, like if you don't mind doing like some work around somebody's house, like like folding clothes or ironing and cleaning people's houses, or like I said, landscaping, or taking away large articles of trash, or wherever the case may be. Tackle is a great place for you to kind of jumpstart your entrepreneurial journey. And like I said, like the freelance marketplace is a growing space. Day in and day out. We're moving more and more into what we like to call a service economy, or the share economy, if you will. And so a lot of people are engaging. Also, and I'm not sure if they have any felony related, restrictions or whatever the case may be. But Uber and Lyft are great and excellent sources. If you got a car, those are great sources to start your entrepreneurial journey, depending on where you live in the country or in the world for that matter. If you live in a high density area, you can make a lot of money driving for Uber. I was riding the Uber the other day, and he said a friend of his in Nashville makes like $1,600 a week. That's a pretty decent living. Just to driving people around. So, there are great ways to jumpstart that entrepreneurial career, and that freelancer marketplace, the freelance marketplace, is an excellent way to get started. And just like the title episode, doesn't require background checks for the most part, especially like on an Upwork or something like that. They don't require background checks. Also, Startup Nation, if you have an idea to start a company and you just got out and you having a hard time, maybe the SBA microloan situation didn't work out for you, GoFundMe and Indiegogo are always looking for new ideas to fund. Now, GoFundMe is usually more so towards like trying to help somebody with funeral expenses, or trying to help somebody with like educational or medical expenses because there's some type of story that's attached to it. But if you can create a creative way to convince somebody to fund a business idea, then go for it on GoFundMe. Now, Indiegogo is specifically for entrepreneurial ideas or products or whatever the case may be. So I would go to Indiegogo first and then try GoFundMe. But those are two excellent resources to try to fund ideas. Also, the small business development resource centers around the country. We have them here in Memphis. We have them in Nashville. They're all over the place, right? And so those are great places for you to go to kind of vet out those entrepreneurial journeys, those entrepreneurial ideas. They have people that come in from all walks of life to come in and talk about marketing and research and getting money and getting government contracts and how to make sure you know how to read a contract properly, or even how to use QuickBooks. The point is, like, there's another resource there for you. If you live here in Memphis, 555 Bill Street is a great place where they have a SBDC office there, and they also have the Black Business Bureau, the Better Black Business Bureau there in that building, and they have like literally a business library. And so if they have this in Memphis, I imagine they have this all over the country in a lot of different similar amenities, if more or less, depending on where you are. And lastly, Startup Nation, SCORE. SCORE is is a nationwide organization that helps people start businesses. Once again, just like the small business development centers, they have speakers, they have people to help you write a business plan, they have people to help you find funding, they have a myriad of programs and ideas. So if you're somebody who had to serve some time or whatever, SCORE is an excellent resource for you to vet out to kind of see what they can do for you. And lastly, Startup Nation, before we head out for today, I want to give you proof of concept of people who have served time. They've been in your shoes and they've redeveloped themselves, reinvented themselves, started companies, and now they are quite successful. And the thing is, Startup Nation, the reason I wanted to make this episode before I continue is because, like, a lot of times, you're behind the eight ball if you were to go into the job field and find a job, whatever the case may be, in not only finding that job, but also being paid what most people will get paid with people who don't have records. People who have a record make 40% less than people who don't have a record. And so when we advocate here on the Startup Life for entrepreneurship, specifically for people who have served time, we want you to get that notion. We want you to understand that number, that a lot of times that, like, you could be, jeopardizing your earning potential by going into the workforce. I'm not saying don't go into the workforce, because if you find work wherever you can. But what I am saying is that you should have all the information at your disposal to make the best decision for yourself. And so that is why I made this episode. That is why I gave you that figure. I want you to understand that there may be a chance where you may be earning less just because you have a record. And I don't necessarily think that's fair. And so what I want to try to do is to level that playing field, to give you the opportunity to show another path to where you can make that much, just as much, if not more, because now you're the owner as opposed to the employee. But anyway, I want to give you some ideas or some proof of concept of people who have served time but are now very successful entrepreneurs. One of the first people, I want to highlight is Piper Kerman. You may know Piper Kerman, you may not know Piper Kerman, but if you don't know her, then you probably know that show Orange is the New Black. Well, it's based on Piper Kerman, who was convicted of money laundering for a heroin ring. And so she wrote this memoir about her time being in prison. And then, obviously it was a best-selling book, so made a lot of money from it. And then that book got turned into a Netflix show, a very popular Emmy Award-winning Netflix show. And so, once again, somebody who made a mistake and turned it into a positive. And then there's Frederick Hudson. Hudson, served time for trafficking marijuana, right? And so he actually created an app called Pigeonly. It's an inmate database to help people find incarcerated family members. Once again, turning a negative into a positive and turning it into a very lucrative and amazing app that has made him a lot of money. Cos Marte is one of the probably the more successful ones that we hear about from time to time. He started ConBody. He was running a $2 million drug ring up in New York and served some time in prison. But while he was in prison, he worked out a lot and worked out to the point where he lost like 70 pounds. And so when he started, when he got out, he opened or started ConBody, a prison-style boot camp exercise company that has like 400 clients a week, right? And he's been featured on Startup, the podcast Startup, which there in the show notes is a link to if you want to hear his story in full. He's spoken at CNBC events. He's spoken all around the country telling his story. But he took what happened in prison and turned that into a company. So it goes back to what we were saying earlier, Startup Nation, about be fully engaged in the culinary arts, be fully engaged in your prison jobs. There's an opportunity there in what you're doing to not just focus on the job, but figure out the process, figure out what can be had. How can I turn this into a company when I get out of prison? So, when you think about what you're doing in your prison jobs, think about that and think about Cos Marte as, he opened and designed ConBody. Cedric Hornbuckle was, served 8 years on a prison charge and went through down to Texas. They have the prison entrepreneurship program. Once again, like I said, certain correctional facilities have programs specifically for not just rehabilitating once you got out, but for entrepreneurship. And look, just because you're incarcerated doesn't mean you can't advocate for yourself. If you find yourself not having that in your facility, advocate for it. Write the warden, ask one of the guard. Like if granted, I imagine you have to be in pretty good standing as an inmate, whatever the case may be. But hell, there's nothing wrong with advocating. What's the worst that can happen? Now look, I'm keep in mind, I'm speaking from a place I've never served in prison. So if you feel like something's going to happen, don't take my word for it. But if you can find a place to advocate for yourself, advocate for yourself. And so there should, like I said, all around the country, there are facilities that do have these programs in place. And if you don't have a program in place, advocate for yourself to see if you can get that program in place. But when Hornbuckle got out of jail, he got out and started his own moving company, Moved by Love. Very successful. He goes around speaking to people, not just about the prison to pipeline system, but also speaking about how he turned his negative into a positive. Another one of the more commercial ones, 50 Cent. 50 Cent served time in juvenile detention, and then when he got out, signed to Shady Records or whatever it was called with Dr. Dre and Eminem. Now, multi-million-dollar hip hop artist that finds himself being petty from time to time, but that's a whole nother story from a whole nother podcast. But took a bet on himself and started his music career. He actually the famous story about how he got that $100 million deal from Coca-Cola when he was had invested stake in Vitamin Water. Coca-Cola bought it for $4 billion and boom, $100 million check right in his hand. So there are ways, and there are always, ways to rewrite a story. There's always another chapter. No matter what happened in the past, there's always another chapter to write. Either you can write that chapter or you can have somebody else to write that chapter. I'm an advocate for you writing your own chapter. Georgia Durante was a model for Kodak, and then she became a stunt driver for commercials in the 90s. Now, What she also did was marry a mobster and worked as a getaway driver. And so she had to serve some time for that, but she got out and started her own stunt driving company, Performance 2, and wrote a memoir, which are both quite lucrative for Miss Durante. Now, Kevin Mitnick is one of my favorites, and I kind of alluded to this earlier before. He at 16, he became a fugitive for hacking 40 corporations. He was on the run for a while. And then when he got out of jail for 2002, he started a cybersecurity company called Mitnick Security, where he still breaches networks and still hacks companies, but they pay him to find the vulnerabilities. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. The thing that you did can actually service, companies elsewhere. There's been people who teach car companies how to break into cars, right? So that way they can find the vulnerabilities in that regard. Hacking computer systems the same way. So just because you went to jail for that thing doesn't mean that thing can't be reapplied elsewhere. It's all about the entrepreneurial mindset. There's a way and a path always, Startup Nation. One of my favorite stories is Frank Abigail. Abigail was a con man. He was writing fake checks at 16, and he cashed in over $2.5 million in fraudulent checks. He went on to go to prison, obviously, but he also, when he got out, he was able to teach the FBI on how to find and write fraudulent checks, right? He wrote a book. Spielberg turned that book into a movie, and you probably heard one of my favorite movies, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks, right? And so once again, you take the thing that you went to jail for and you can turn it into a positive, right? There's always, that's the thing, and I know I'm a nerd, it's fine, but there's always balance in the force. Just because it's negative on one side doesn't mean it can't be used in a positive manner on the other side. And so once again, when we talk about Piper Kerman, Frank Abagnale, and Kevin Mitnick, those are great examples of turning that negative into a positive. So here's my final take. Look, let me be clear about something. I have never been to jail. I have never sniffed the inside of a jail cell. So if there's something I said in this episode that is not conducive to the incarceration experience, whatever the case may be, forgive me. It comes from a place of ignorance. But my purpose of this episode was to show that, look, we have all made mistakes. We have all done things that we're not proud of. Some of us got caught, some of us didn't. But for those of you that did and you served your time, you should not be punished for it again. You should not. And I think it's an outright travesty that you have to pay that second price that we talked about earlier. But just because you paid that price doesn't mean you don't have a control over your life. Now, granted, some of you may have lost the power to vote, unless you're in Florida, because that's being reinstated. And the thing about stuff like that is, quick sidebar, the thing about stuff like that is, if it happens in one place, it's like a ripple effect. So just because it started in Florida doesn't mean it won't happen anywhere else. It'll probably other places start getting the right to vote back. But my point is that you deserve a second chance. You absolutely deserve that second chance. And for the many of you who have served time, you feel like you don't get that second chance or you don't know where to start. That's why I made this episode. I've had this episode on the shelf for months, but I finally got around to doing it because I see too many of not just people in my community, but some even my friends who I know for a fact are good people. And they just found themselves in a situation to where it's they felt like they had no other way but to do that thing. But I'm here to tell you that you've made a mistake. The purpose of jail is to rehabilitate. The purpose of jail is to make sure you pay back to society what you took from it. And even with all that, though, I don't feel like you should have to pay that second price. I just don't think that's fair. Now, there are many people out there who will say, they're look, well, they broke the law, this, that, and the other. I get that. And I'm not saying that they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and they should serve their time. But once they serve their time, their debt to society is repaid. There shouldn't be a second, third, fourth price to pay. So when you think about, being reacclimated in society, think about rebuilding that credit piece, because that part is important. That only establishes not just your credit, but also starts to reestablish your character as well. That's actually, when you talk about the 5 C's of credit, character is one of them. And so when you talk about the character piece in the 5 C's of credit, they look at stuff like, have you been to prison, and your morality and this, that, and the other, right? So keep that in mind as well. And also, like I said, if entrepreneurship isn't for you, that's fine. We gave you plenty of ideas to kind of who to go towards when trying to find that path to employment, because you deserve that. You've earned that part. You like I said, you don't as a member of society, you don't owe me anymore. You don't owe me anymore. You don't owe anybody else. Maybe your family, because you took time away from them, and that's something you have to reconcile with them. But as far as a member of society, to me, you don't owe me no more. And you don't owe anybody else anymore. And you deserve the right to steal, even after your mistake, to control your destiny, control your luck, control your life. That part's over. So when you think about, reestablishing your credit, and you think about your employment, if that's something you want to go towards, remember that. And if you decide to become that entrepreneur, remember that there are people out there who want to help you. Like I said, I've thought about starting one of those chapters myself. And once I, finish up with some of my nonprofit work that I do on a regular basis, that's something that I may strongly consider, because I feel passionate about this. I've never been to jail, but I have friends who have paid that debt, and it bothers me when they have to pay that second price. It's not fair. It's not fair. And so just reminder, if you want to do that entrepreneurship path, there's resources for you. Grants.gov, your correctional facility, your community, your churches. If you have to go back to school, if the federal government has resources out there for you. There's a pathway. And not only is there a pathway, just like I just mentioned in the last segment, there's people who've done it before. So that means that there's people who've done it before, you can do it too. It's all right there for you. So if anybody ever tells you that, you should be discarded from society, or you should be left behind, no. You deserve the right to fulfill your destiny. You deserve the right to write your own story. You deserve the right to make the life that you want. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I wanted to get in your head. You deserve the life that you want, even though you made a mistake. And the people that have a problem with that, fuck them. That's their problem, not yours. And I believe that if you remember that you can empower yourself, if you remember that you can control your own fate, that you can remember you can control your own destiny, you can create the life that you want, and you don't need anybody's fucking permission to do so. So that's going to do it for this episode of The Startup Life. I hope you got great value from this content. Is one of those things where it's a passion for me, for people to understand that they can control their own fate, even if they made mistakes. But it's one of those things where I needed to do this episode, and I really hope somebody out there gets extreme value from it. If you want to let us know what you think about the show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a new way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is here in the show notes. To subscribe to the show, as it can now be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life.